Hello everyone. I just watched a video by my friend Vegard who expresses that he is having trouble quitting smoking.
I also want to quit smoking. This nasty thing here. Ugh. I know it's disgusting, but it's really hard to stop. Yeah.
Now, if you guys don't know, I used to smoke myself and actually was successful at quitting. I had my last cigarette back in September. Quitting smoking is a difficult thing. It is very challenging. Smoking is very hard on your body, very tough on your body, and most people know this. However, people who smoke, who know the impacts on their body, still do it. Now, if you don't smoke personally, here's kind of what it's like, at least how I found it to be like. Do you ever have any problems with eating right? Say you're going on a diet and you have a really hard time dropping those treats, dropping maybe your favorite snack. It's a very similar feeling to that. Say you're starting to get overweight and you're eating junk food every single day, and you come to that point and realize, hey, I gotta cut back, I gotta start eating well, and the next day you say, I'm gonna hit it hard, and what happens? You start to have these cravings. It's very difficult. Day one goes by, day two it gets even more difficult, the cravings get harder. Those cravings are very similar to the types of cravings that one gets with smoking, except maybe like 500 times worse, because one, you become super irritable. Number two, it's a very similar feeling to trying to hold your breath underwater, like having a hold your breath contest underwater. At first you dunk your head down, but as time goes on, you want your breath, you want a breath of oxygen. So eventually, no matter how hard you try and hold your breath, eventually you need that gasp of air. You can't help it. Your body will overtake your mind and just burst out of the water to grasp some air. I find smoking to be very similar. If you're smoking a lot of cigarettes and then decide to quit cold turkey, a very similar feeling of your body taking you over will happen. The cravings in the first hour might be kind of mild, but as time goes on, it's like holding your breath, just white knuckling, and eventually you just say, I can't take it anymore, I need a cigarette or I'm going to go crazy. Another thing is, it makes you so irritable and puts you in a bad mood when you don't have your cigarettes that at least I found that I was so moody, I just felt that I didn't want to be around people, and I felt like a different person. And after a while, I realized I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be mean or irritable or not wanting to be around people. I felt better off just smoking and giving up and going back to my old ways. So being that said, a lot of people do quit cold turkey and are successful at it. A lot of people who quit cold turkey get to a point of pain where they just can't take the smoking habit anymore and they quit cold turkey. However, people who quit cold turkey, it usually takes them several times before they finally end up quitting for good. So for me, quitting cold turkey never worked for me. When I tried to quit smoking cold turkey, I felt like I was in more of a scarcity mindset, that I was giving something up, and that's not a great place to start when you're trying to quit smoking, having this feeling of giving something up, because your body will have that response, I need it now, take over your mind and your thinking, even though if you have a rational thought of, yeah, I'll quit smoking, it's bad for my health, why not quit? Eventually these thoughts will overtake your mind and you'll end up smoking. So cold turkey did not work for me. If I said, hey, I'm going to have 0 cigarettes a day and for the rest of the week and the rest of my life, eventually I wouldn't have that mentality anymore. And when I told myself, I gave these rules and circumstances to myself of not smoking at all, what I was doing was setting a standard of not smoking cigarettes, but not being able to fulfill that. In that sense, I felt like I was out of control. I told myself to do one thing, but I wasn't able to stay committed to that challenge, which made me feel out of control. I couldn't follow through with what I was even telling myself to do. Also, if you tell yourself to be perfect, if you tell yourself, I'm not going to have one single cigarette and it's going to be perfect, well, then you set a standard of perfection. And if you set a standard of perfection and you're not able to be perfect, nobody's perfect, then it's like not setting a standard at all. You're setting a standard where you're setting yourself up for failure, and you'll probably feel more guilty and worse about it if you set a standard like this. So I like the quote. I heard this from Tony Robbins. Don't be perfect, be outstanding. How can you be outstanding? How could you take on a challenge to grow? What can you do to get yourself closer to your goal? Yes, quitting smoking for good might be your ultimate goal, but most people aren't able to quit it cold turkey, and so perhaps it's better to seek an alternate route on maybe weaning yourself off or reaching your goal over time. Now, to address that feeling of being out of control, what I did was I set a specific standard or amount of cigarettes that I thought would be a good limit for me for that day. I remember at the time of setting this standard, I was smoking maybe 5, 6, 7, or 8 smokes a day, something around that line. So I told myself I'd rather be smoking around the area of 3 or 4 a day, like cut my consumption in half. However, I'm not going to be so rigid that if I go over 4, like my limit is 4. What I wanted to do was say, hey, I want to be around 4. And what I did was I started counting and tracking the amount of cigarettes I had in a day. So what this did was bring a lot of awareness to my habits. Instead of having a cigarette every single time I felt like having a smoke, every single time my brain went beep, 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 time to have a smoke, time to have a smoke, I just whip out my cigarettes and have a smoke. I said to myself, hey, I only want 3 or 4 today, and so maybe I'll wait a little bit longer because I already had 2 today and it's only 1 o'clock, and it helped me make that decision of, hey, I could hold off a little bit longer. I could say no now and procrastinate this craving to have a cigarette later on in that day. So in essence, I didn't feel like I had a scarcity mindset because I was still allowing myself to smoke and have cigarettes and have that habit, but I started practicing, 1, being aware of how much I was smoking a day, 2, started developing the habit of saying no, I'm not going to have a cigarette right now, instead of following blindly with my cravings, and 3, I wasn't in a scarcity mindset because I didn't say that 4 was my limit. I said I want to be around 4. So perhaps one day I just had a really, really, really bad day and I ended up having 5 or 6. Still, I could track and say, hey, I had 5 or 6 that day. Geez, I went a little bit over my limit, but at least I could be non-judgmental about it and just observe it and say, hey, I gotta try a little bit harder tomorrow. Maybe if I'm having a bad day, like, that's an indication of trying a little bit harder, and set a little standard of saying, hey, I'm not going to let myself smoke just because I'm having a bad day. And I'm also able to forgive myself and say, hey, this is like a little bit out of the range that I've been doing all week. I'm setting a standard of saying about 4 cigarettes a day. Well, yesterday I had 3. The day before I had 4, and the day before I did really good, I had 2. I was below that benchmark I gave myself, and today I had 6, which is more, but at least I have something to compare it to. I feel like I'm in control more rather than blindly smoking or telling myself I'm not going to have any smokes today and then feeling guilty about each one. And again, what I notice is the feeling of guilt Like, the feeling of guilt builds anxiety in your body, and when anxiety is in your body, you're more likely to feel like you're going to smoke. So if you have no standard at all, then end up having, and say, like, I'm going to not have any cigarettes today, and that's your standard, and then you end up having a cigarette, then one, you say you feel more guilty about that one cigarette, which means that you're more likely to have more cigarettes just because you feel guilty in your body and you want to lower that anxiety. It's just like a circular like mess in your mind. But also, by having that one cigarette, you might feel like you failed and then just go completely off the board and say, well, I failed the challenge, so I might as well smoke as much as I want. Yes, that is a mentality that I've had. It's a mentality that a lot of people have, even though it makes no logical sense whatsoever. Like, why does it make sense to completely sabotage yourself and smoke to oblivion just because you weren't able to reach your goal? That doesn't make any logical sense. However, most people, or a lot of people, seem to have this mentality. And that's okay to have that mentality, but it's also good to be aware of your own limitations, your own irrational thoughts when it comes to this type of thing. Finally, I'll share you a little formula when it comes to setting goals. This is something I learned from Tony Robbins in his program Time of Your Life. It's great to determine your outcome, the purpose, why you are even doing that, and the specific actions you are going to take based on your outcome and the reasons why. You see, a lot of people set goals by writing down the actions they're going to take without thinking of the specific outcome that they want and the reasons why they are even doing it. A person might realize that they need to get healthier or they're starting to gain a little bit of weight, so they set the goal of, I'm going to run for 10 miles a day or 10 kilometers a day, or I'm going to cut out this food, or I'm going to eat all vegetables, and like that's their goal, which is a good starting point. But first of all, if you start acting on that goal and you realize that it's very painful, if you don't have reasons why backed up in your mind, if you didn't determine the reasons of why you were doing it in the first place or the specific result that you want, then you might say to yourself, I only know why I'm doing this, I'm just going to give up. Like, what? So an ultimate outcome is something that's very specific, something that you want, something that has a lot of details that are tangible and you could kind of notice that it is actually happening. So with smoking, you might set a specific goal of quitting on a specific date, or cutting your cigarettes down by a specific amount by a certain date or something like that. The purpose, the main point of a purpose, is to really reflect, why am I doing what I am doing? For me, I just realized that smoking, there was no sense about it. I started learning about anatomy and physiology in the body, and I'm actually in a program called Personal Support Worker right now, which is a nursing program. So I'm learning a ton about health and almost every single disease out there, something that contributes to these diseases tenfold is smoking. Like heart disease, diseases of the liver, several different skin diseases, cancers, osteoporosis, which is when your bones become less dense and more brittle. A lot of people know this type of stuff, but it's not very motivating. But still, that's one reason why. I realized it just didn't serve any purpose. Like a lot of reasons in my mind, you know, my illogical part of my mind would be like, well, your friends are smoking it and it's kind of fun to smoke or seem cool around your friends. And I realized that's irrational, that doesn't make sense. And every time I thought about my real reasons why, which were basically the disease component, like I don't want to end up being in a hospital later in my life just suffering because I made poor choices earlier in my life. Even though my friends were doing it, that's not a very good reason, like logically, to do something. And also, I know a lot of people struggle with smoking, and a component of why I quit smoking was actually to help other people. If I were able to go through the process of quitting smoking, then I'm can share my wisdom just like I am in this video to helping other people get over this. And I know so many people struggle with quitting smoking, that if I quit smoking, then I could be an example for other people, which is what I'm trying to do in this video right now. So those were two really big reasons why I was able to continue to quit smoking. Every time I had those irrational thoughts like, your friends are doing it, or like I feel a little bit stressed and having a cigarette will reduce that stress, I realized in my mind, hey, that doesn't make sense because one, the disease component, two, I want to be a role model, which eventually overrid those bullshit reasons that my emotional mind was making up, basically. Another purpose is that I wanted to feel better. I wanted to feel healthier and more vibrant and energized and show up in this world. You know, you only live this life once, so might as well live that life to the fullest. Do I want to continue smoking and have that smoking habit for the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, and then after that end up having some sort of disease and have to sit in the hospital paying a bunch of medical bills, and then try to quit smoking then because my doctor basically told me I was going to die or have this disease? No, I don't want that at all. I want to go through the little bit of pain, which is good pain in my experience of quitting smoking, because it is painful to quit smoking. But I realized that going through that little pain period or whatever would be great, because one, it helps me set boundaries for other things. Like if I quit smoking and I'm able to say no to smoking, I'm able to say no to other things. I'm able to build my willpower for other things like eating healthier, exercising, or even just talking with other people, not letting people take advantage of me. If someone says something that I don't like, I have more willpower, I have more of a boundary to say something about it. If I have a goal that I want to strive for, now I have more willpower because I was able to go through the hard times and build my spirit by quitting smoking. Well, I could use that same energy in other areas of my life as well, so it leaks into all other parts of my life. Now, based on outcome and purpose, we could then determine the actions from there. Instead of just saying, oh, I'm just going to not smoke, which is kind of like a flimsy, non-specific, it's not really attached to a purpose, a reason why. Like, your friend could come up to you and be like, hey man, let's have a smoke. And you're like, no, I'm not smoking. And they're like, why man? Whatever, it's cool. I'm smoking right now and I feel fine. Like, that might not be like the greatest explanation or reason to smoke. But if you're addicted, then your mind will be easily convinced to have that cigarette if you don't have your reasons backed up. Let me tell you that. Like someone saying, hey, have a smoke because I'm having a cigarette, seems mighty appealing when you're really craving a cigarette. So here's a few actions that I would recommend when it comes to quitting smoking. One is replace rather than just getting rid of it. Like you might set a goal of not smoking. Well, how about every time you're about to crave a cigarette, you instead replace that with a healthy item like a piece of fruit or some water. That way you're kind of replacing that habit rather than just white knuckling it and just like seething and like hoping the craving goes away. It trains your mind whenever you have that craving to go somewhere else. And a lot of the times people have cravings for cigarettes when they're craving sugar anyway. So eating a piece of fruit will lower that craving. Another thing I would recommend along that same line is going out and just taking a few deep breaths, taking a break. A lot of people, they go for their smoke break, they go outside and they notice that they feel less stressed out. But do you know what else makes you feel less stressed out? Is just going outside, and breathing the air outside, seeing the outside world, which is one reason that going outside and having a smoke break to begin with relieves stress, because you get outside, you kind of breathe the fresh air. You breathe fresh air and cigarettes, but you take in long breaths after taking short breaths, probably like maybe in an office situation, you're taking short breaths, you're confined in little walls. Well, like seeing the outside world, taking some deep breaths really reduces stress. So if you're feeling that, then just go outside and get the fresh air and the benefits from fresh air. Of course, I already mentioned this, but track the amount of cigarettes you're having. This, I find, allows you to put in like a little extra step before quitting. This way, if you just have a goal of tracking your cigarettes, then you build awareness of your own habits. I've read a study that said people tracking what they ate actually helped them lose weight. What they told this guy was to simply track what he was eating every day, but not to change any of his habits. What they noticed was over the course of the year, he lost 20 pounds. And that is because subconsciously he was tracking what he was doing and subconsciously made small, minor changes, even though he wasn't trying to do it on purpose. Now, tracking your cigarettes is a great first step because, one, it brings awareness. Two, you don't have to quit right away. You're kind of giving yourself that time to build awareness without having to actually take a whole lot of action on quitting the smoking. And I think that's like a really good first step when you're taking a journey into quitting smoking. Another thing that you can do, which is recommended, which is not something that I personally done, but there's no shame in asking for help. One, you could look online and see support groups of people quitting smoking, or online find people who are going through the journey of quitting smoking. On YouTube, there's plenty of people that are talking about this journey of quitting smoking, or 3 people who already quit. 4, you could actually talk to an actual counselor or psychiatrist or what have you, therapist, that could definitely help you reduce and quit smoking. There's nothing wrong with finding support. There's nothing wrong at all finding support. What I would recommend with therapists or any doctors or anything like that is to look online, look at reviews. With the magic of the internet these days, instead of just going to a doctor and finding out that they're a quack or they suck, you could look up reviews and people have done that for you. Like, my assumption was if they had a degree and they're like a psychiatrist, then they must be good, right? Well, I looked at a review site one time and I noticed that there was a couple doctors and psychiatrists that were getting a lot of 1 stars, and they were talking about how unprofessional they were, they didn't help at all. And then I found other reviews where they were all 5 stars and every single person talked about how amazing they were. So make sure to do your research before doing something like that as well. Anyway, I think I blabbed on enough. I hope you got something out of this. In the comments down below, give me one suggestion or strategy when it comes to changing a habit, whether that be exercising, making a health goal, or changing a health habit, or trying to quit smoking, something like that. What is one strategy or something that you have done that helped you out when it comes to changing a habit? Please leave a comment down below, and hopefully your comment will help other people who notice your comment as well. Also, if I get enough good comments on this video, I will start mentioning them in a future video, so your comments can go on to help other people as well. Hope you got something out of that. Peace. Mike Marino videos.